Hey, what's up, guys? We're going to be getting into some brand new court documents today that was released yesterday, as well as a brand new Neeks Peaks video. What's really going behind the scenes in Moscow, Idaho? What kind of chicanery and fuckery is going on there in Moscow?
On what turned out to be a more quiet than usual night, in the bustling area just behind Greek Row, a 7-year bubble of tranquility was violently burst.
Tragedy at the University of Idaho, a day after 4 students were found dead in a home just steps away from campus.
It's been 5 days since 4 University of Idaho students were found dead inside their home just off campus. And we know there were 2 other roommates in the home at the time of the murders. And when police got there, they were not hurt. Police say they are cooperating. Moscow police wouldn't go so far, though, as to call them witnesses. And yesterday, the coroner's office released the autopsies and found all 4 were stabbed to death with a knife early Sunday morning. Police have not found a suspect or suspects and don't have any people of interest right now.
Who was targeted? If it was multiple people, it would go a long ways to telling the public what you're looking for, who you're looking for, the type of person you're looking for. Why not do that to alleviate some of the fears out there in the community? Don't you want more information from the public?
We do want more information, but we don't want to be honest, you're going to have to trust us on that at this point, because we're not going to release why we think that.
The handling of the case, shrouded in secrecy, did little to dispel the growing horror.
Problems at the campus, maybe talk of a stalker. There's been talk that maybe Kaylee had a stalker.
Kaylee was an absolute beautiful, beautiful girl. It wouldn't surprise me if all of the beautiful kids that we lost had stalkers, okay? That wouldn't surprise me. I don't think that that's what it was, though. I will be honest with you. I think it's closer than that. I think it's deeper than that. I think I think they have information that they're not giving us, and it's real fishy.
When you say you think it goes deeper than that, what do you mean?
I mean, I think it was somebody closer than a stalker, and I don't know who. I'm not gonna specify anything like that. I'm just going to say I think that it was somebody, and I think possibly they may have trusted. That's the only thing I can think of, because how could something like this happen so quickly, so quietly, so without any answer, unless it was somebody super close to that. You know what I mean?
Do you think the person who did this had been in that house before?
I think they knew them. I think they may have even been friends with them. I think it had to have been somebody close to them to have been able to get away with it like this. It just without, it just doesn't make sense. None of this makes any sense. It had to have been somebody they trusted that was, you know what I mean? I mean,
as a mother, I feel like they know him. I do. I've always felt that way. Nobody has told me that anyway. I just feel it. Yeah. I mean, this is a college town. It's a small town. I feel the girls knew this person.
But we don't know that.
We don't. Yeah. We absolutely don't know that. I just feel it in my heart that they knew the person. And I've always felt that way. I don't know why, but I've always said they knew him. They knew him. They know him. Yeah. I just don't feel like this was like some rando just driving through Moscow happened to stop by their house.
Well, John, there's a couple of things that I think are really troubling here. One, of course, is the lack of detail. Now, you would never expect any police agency to share all of the details of a crime of this nature with the public, but you would expect them to tell you some of the basics about how they're doing and what they're thinking, simply to calm fears, to let folks know that they're on the job and they're getting things done. Not only have they not done that, they've actually made statements that are contradictory and cause more confusion than they've helped. So how quickly they ruled out a fairly large group of folks who seem to have played key roles in the discovery of this crime. So you have the two roommates who were on the premises when the murders were taking place. You have some number of either a friend or some friends who came over to see those roommates the next morning before the 911 call was made. You have the individual who drove the two females from the food trucks back to their house right before the homicides took place. And all of those folks have been kind of dismissed as having no involvement. It just seems kind of quick to be writing off folks who were so close to this event. You'd think you'd want to do a pretty substantial, thorough investigation of each one of those people and their networks to ensure that there's absolutely no connection before you go out to the public and say, yeah, we've cleared all these people. But, again, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
During the critical hour of the murder, there were 12 figures of interest. This includes an unmarked Moscow police unit with 2 officers inside, who stopped 4 suspects. Additionally, 4 individuals were caught running in the background of Axon body camera footage. Completing the count, there were 2 surviving roommates from the incident. Thus, including the 2 police officers, there were a total of 12 key figures present in the vicinity during that crucial time frame.
Eager for answers. Well, now we're not going to be getting much, or if any, of those answers from anyone involved with the case. Just a few hours ago, a magistrate judge in Latah County issued a gag order preventing anyone, investigators, law enforcement, attorneys, or agents of any attorneys from talking about this case publicly.
It's new, we're not used to the national attention quite this big. So I take responsibility for information not getting out as fast as possible. I probably should have been much quicker on that, but in the beginning of these, we're a small department, so everybody's working on this case, and me to be included. But we realized pretty quickly that we needed to get information out. That's why we called in the PIO team.
Thank you, Debbie.
The investigators' choice to utilize an internal team for interviews, rather than engaging with the media, is portrayed as a strategic decision aimed at aiding the investigation. They present this approach as though it's about efficiently disseminating information, rather than a tactic to avoid tough media scrutiny.
I've always seen our house. Sam's a good friend before, Ethan even came up. But that's all I really want to talk about right now because I actually have class here in like 15 minutes.
Sigma Chi President Reed Offson says the fraternity is cooperating with the investigation. The fraternity is about half a block from the house where the murders happened.
Does anyone know where they were during that timeline? Like, there's still this big chunk where...
As of right now, we've told Moscow PD, Idaho State Police, and the FBI all we know. We're kind of leaving it up to them to piece it together. Obviously, we don't have the utilities or resources to do it on our own, so we're just putting full faith in the officers and in the detectives doing it. But that's all I really know right now.
Are there any cameras around?
No.
You said Dana was a friend and Ethan was like a member of the house? Okay.
And what was your name again?
Reed.
Reed what?
Offsun.
How do you spell that?
OFSTHUN.
When I went up there, I saw her just a week before that. She changed a lot. She had a life. She got to see what it was to have a boyfriend to live with and have a real life. And she really turned around and was being really responsible.
All right, guys, we have 3 new motions in the House. Let's start with the objection for venue change. The state argues that the defendant's motion to change venue is premature, implying that it's been filed too early in the legal process and that there aren't sufficient grounds for that. It also cites a lack of adequate information, stating that defense attorneys had not provided enough information to prove that a fair trial or impartial jury cannot be found in Latah County. It specifically requests that the court issue the trial date and additional tasks pertaining to that, establish a briefing schedule for the defendant's motion, and schedule a hearing date. They also request deadlines for submission on all supporting documents pertaining to the venue change, blah, blah. Then the document goes on to name some criteria for the venue change. All right, blah, blah, blah. We took a new turn in the case. Defense got their experts. Now, a motion that was filed by defense attorneys for Koberger requests clarification of the sealed order for disclosure of investigative genealogy information. It focuses on a stipulation within the sealed order that prohibits defense or any of its agents from contacting individuals identified on the family tree without prior court authorization. The stipulation is based on demonstrating the necessity and materiality of such contact if the defense chooses to ask for that. Well, Koberger's defense points out that individuals identified through the protected IgG materials also inadvertently could restrict them from their ability to engage with these same witnesses or resources without the IgG paperwork. That's probably a terrible way to explain that. Okay, so what she's saying is, like, I'm already in contact with these people. Obviously, if it's just like a normal aunt, sister, whoever, she's already in contact with these witnesses. She's already doing mitigating defense work with these witnesses. And then now she finally gets the IgG turned over, looks at that seal, and there's something stating she needed to implicitly ask to have contact with people she's already had contact with, or is simultaneously, continuously having contact with. Did that make sense? So defense was ordered to not have any contact with anyone on this tree without implicitly getting the permission of the court first. And in essence, Koberger's attorneys want them to specify that these restrictions pertaining to contacting individuals listed in the family tree apply solely to those that were identified to them, defense attorneys, from that tree and on that tree only. In response, the state says that the defense attorneys are free to.
We found Sprizzy through a Google search, pretty much. I was looking for a way to market our YouTube.
Hit up whoever they want as long as it was some other lead that led them to that witness. And I'm like, so are they supposed to be able to provide how they got to that person that wasn't IgG? Doesn't that just, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Not to mention the fact that if they really wanted to, they could perform their own family tree and essentially hopefully wind up with a pool of similar suspects in theory. But of course, it would take a lot longer and it'd be all against that whole, attorneys are supposed to disclose things to one another because they're supposed to perform above board investigations. Go figure. I digress again. Okay. All right. This next part is weird. Prosecutors point out that the purpose of these experts or investigators going through the IgG information is to understand what led the state to Koberger. Well, prosecutors allege that through the TUI letter that is used in order to request the information from the FBI. So if the FBI specifically, however I said that. So if it's not the feds charging you, this is the way that a state or city municipal court would garner information from outside federal agencies that help them build a case on you. It is a way to mitigate all of the different courts being able to utilize federal agents and federal information pertaining to their disclosure guidelines and to easily access that testimony and that actual agent in court. A TUI letter. Okay, so prosecutors say that in that letter, defense attorneys for Koberger should have everything they need. And they're so nice. They do allow any nameless agent so long as they actually want to bring their name forward, because prosecutors say that's the least they can do if they want to review that TUI letter as though she needs them to review it, right? Because she would totally have to hire an outside agent in order to understand the letter. But It's kind of insane. It literally makes me want to bang my head against the wall how little sense that makes. So the prosecuting attorney is telling defense attorneys that they can find the probable cause that was gathered in order to arrest their client, the defense's client, in the letter that went back and forth between prosecution and the FBI, not in the probable cause warrant. Oh, wait, they specifically left IGG out of the probable cause warrant. That part. So, without even explaining it, I'm going to go ahead and predict that eventually this is going to lodge a motion to suppress the STR evidence in court. You can't get to the STR without that IGG work. You just can't. And it's kind of blatant, not even kind of, it's blatantly weird that prosecuting attorneys try to leave that out. It's just like this weird, there's so much wiggle room throughout the PCA, and the evidence that's been presented so far being entirely interdependent, meaning without one, you can't have the other. It's like Married with Children in this bitch, because Department of Justice specifies that you need to have some other substantive piece of evidence other than the forensic genealogy leads. So there needs to be something else to corroborate guilt other than the forensic leads. Otherwise, we just be leaving federal agents surreptitiously stealing everyone's DNA, possibly planning it. I mean, it would just, in my opinion, lead to ask him, and he's supposed to give a type of informed consent in order to go that route to obtain a comparison. So the fact that they could not match their alleged genetic material from the knife sheath button, as they claim, to this defendant without doing forensic genealogy work. And then ding, 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 what do we not have for them, Johnny? Because they can't have this 2015 Hyundai Elantra as their alleged suspect vehicle 1, because suspect vehicle 1 is a 13, or backwards to 2011. And the 2015 had a noticeable facelift. I mean, it's very blatant to any layman. You do not have to be a special agent to see the blatant difference in the facelifted version. There's practically indications all around the car, like all the way around it, on the sides, the trunks, the lights. There's no way that they should have confused this car with a 2011. And there's certainly no way that they should have been able to reverse engineer it and be like, oh, hey, it's March 2023. Special agent such and such decided it totally could have been BK's car. Okay, pretty exciting story, right? Moral of that big long hoopla was that all they have is interdependent evidence. And as defense attorneys for Koberger pointed out, you can read it over and over and over again, and there is no clear connection that establishes probable cause within the Department of Justice, Idaho State Police guidelines pertaining to their contract with Othram, and forensic profile collabing that they do together or outside of each other. So not only that, but it did end up coming down to that big gauntlet I had been telling you guys about. I knew it. I knew that they had uploaded him as a John Doe. And this was brought up whenever defense put experts on the stand that were like, yo, you should have a receipt if you did this through law enforcement portals, because it costs money and therefore it renders a receipt. B, Department of Justice suggests that this is a part of the bare minimum that you're going to be turning over to defense. So they should have obtained a receipt for that. But lo and behold, after all of those months actually fighting and not wanting defense attorneys to even know what private lab had Brian Koberger's genetic material to work on or to generate leads with, They didn't even want him to know where that was. But then finally, boom, it all comes out one day, and then a motion asking the court to protect the IGG information and protect those who had uploaded their DNA into regular user databases. So the state was asking Judge John Judge to consider everyone who has put their DNA in 23andMe, Ancestry.com, MyHeritage. All of them are to be considered informants in the request that prosecuting attorney asked the judge for. It's crazy, okay? And then they basically get it, but I'll say the judge hopefully recognized how like legally absurd that would have been for him to call people who didn't even know they were actually contributing to the databases that law enforcement were illegally searching, but that they could also be simultaneously not knowing that and also informants for the state. What the? Right. So instead of that, they get a in-camera hearing that only has prosecuting attorney and the judge himself there. And it didn't even seem like Anne was going to get the inventory that she wanted, which was just a log of all of the information that they discussed, divulged, and made the judge aware of during that in-camera hearing. And Bill Thompson was particularly miffed when she asked for it too. Is like, I don't understand what this log is that she wants. So that I have to blah, 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 blah. To me, the whole point of this is to keep that bitch out of my business. Like, you remember though the part where it's not your business, bro, and you're not the one going to jail though? That part. But they did get their way as far as it was pertaining to that. Now, one thing that I want everyone to understand is this John Doe profile that they uploaded into a personal database, because I saw a lot of people conjecturing that Anne, in her endeavor to contact all of these witnesses, was essentially going to be making a list of which relatives that opted into law enforcement and which relatives had opted out. But there is no opt-in, opt-out because they used a public database. So there's like literally no option for that user to prevent law enforcement from viewing it, because they are breaking the Department of Justice guidelines and essentially skirting the whole like ethical basis for having these guidelines in the first place. Hold on, I'm gonna go bang my head.
3 razones para reunirse con los misioneros en la Iglesia de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Días.
Okay, I'm back. Kind of hurt. Just kidding, guys. I didn't bang my head. I might though. I'm finna. Okay, so I say so too much, huh? I know if I'm getting on my nerves, I'm getting on y'all's nerves. My bad. Okay, so see?
The Idaho State Police partnered with a renowned private lab to delve into complex DNA evidence found on a knife sheath using investigative genetic genealogy. The project began with the lab developing a SNP profile and starting a genetic family tree. However, the analysis was shifted to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, leading the private lab to stop its work and send the SNP profile to the agency. Defense attorneys argue this move to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, away from an impartial lab, shows clear prejudice and bias, indicating the agency already had a target in mind.
Takes it out of this kit, turns it into an S&P profile, and as soon as they are just chugging along, here comes the FBI like, you know what, scratch that. We got this. We got this. And defense attorneys had already highlighted that this was them targeting Kohberger, because why would you take it out of the hands of a third-party agency that was actually going to be generating leads, like real genetic leads, versus already knowing who you want to point your finger at and being able to manipulate the results there too. Okay, so what else? Definitely wanted to let everyone know about the John Doe thing. Had nothing to do with opting out. Oh, the venue change. Okay, so I constantly see people say, there can still be a pool in Moscow that might not be prejudiced to Kohberger. I do not agree with that statement. I think it's a bit absurd. And, if I'm being honest, I emphatically believe that those who do not want him to get a trial elsewhere are inherently biased and unable to override those biases because, if you really believed in a fair trial or in a fair procedure and process that doesn't violate someone's due process rights, that doesn't violate someone's constitutional rights, you would allow it to move there on default, especially when you have a prosecuting attorney who's like, we cannot do this except for the summertime. What? Nope. The summer. Okay. You guys want summer? Cool. I guess summer works for us, but there's no other time that we can do it ever unless it's summer. I mean, and then he legitimately quotes the town, the people, the high school, and the students at U of I. He never once, unless you count when he ends it with, it's not fair for anybody, but he says, not fair for our students. It's not fair for our citizens. Like, he literally named everyone but the defendant on the other side of the courtroom when he talked about a fair trial. It's absurd. And even the judge was like, well, we're not supposed to be arguing venue today because everything that they're there for a scheduling, but everything that Bill Thompson was saying pertained to venue because all of the reasons he was alleging they couldn't allow BK a trial whenever his attorneys are ready to go was because of the schools and because they have to do it during the summertime. So even the judge was like, well, you seem to be arguing about venue, even though we're not arguing about that today, which in my opinion can be fairly interpreted to say like that's his low-key way of being like, all that shit can be solved with a change of venue. Excuse my language. And it's hard enough to even like perceive the idea that you might get 12 good jurors. We're actually typically only having an outlook that's like 6, right? We want 6. We want 6 of them that we can depend will look at our side objectively. But everyone only ever brings up juries during the conversation of like whether the venue is right or not, which is
Order your free $100 telescope now. We are giving away these amazing telescopes to any outdoor enthusiast.
which is seriously like oversimplifying all of the things that can actually mount to create an unfair trial. Hold on, I'm gonna go bang my head again because Julie Fry is the court clerk who's filing this change of venue motion. That's Chief Fry's wife. Yeah. Kathy, the coroner, was serving her dual purpose because she is a Latah County public defender. And I mean, it blows my mind that they have a county coroner doubling as not just a private defense attorney, which to me is a clear conflict as well, but it doesn't get much more conflicting whenever you combine the county coroner with a public defender. I'm going to go bang my head some more. This case, you guys. But emphatically, the clearest way for a judge, any authority, anyone in the legal profession to demonstrate impartiality, especially amid concerns of trial fairness, is by taking every possible step to ensure and openly communicate efforts towards an impartial proceeding. And even in the shadow of doubt, I mean, if there's an inkling to you that I am biased, that I am unable to overlook my own inherent biases in order to give you that fair trial, if you don't think that I'm going to, let's say that I believe I totally can, but you think that I can't. Are you getting a fair trial if technically you think that I'm unable to do that? I mean, is that possible? So there's a lot of nuance with arguing fairness in trial, but the clearest way out of it is to recuse, change venue, insert solution here, because if someone even perceives you to have a bias, it could be argued that it did infringe their rights. But unfortunately, a lot of people who are truly biased, and especially when it comes to like judges and people in these positions where it's hard to remove them unless they decide to recuse themselves. But unfortunately, what this leaves us is with judges who are actually agreeing to this are probably or possibly actually not biased. So you have the problem where the biased ones are hanging on to the case for dear life, and the ones you were paranoid about and asking to recuse themselves or otherwise be replaced, and you might actually be risking, replacing someone who was irreplaceable. Oops. Damn, I irreplaced my juror again. Have y'all seen my juror? What I do? Damn it.
Well, what do you guys think? I'm going to be getting into some court documents that's going to back up what Neeks Peaks said. Comes now, Brian C. Koberger, by and through his attorneys, and hereby moves this court for an order clarifying language contained in the sealed order for disclosure of IGG information and protection order filed with the court on December 29th, 2023. The court sealed order states that no individual on the family tree may be contacted by the defense or any agent of the defense. Why the fuck is that, guys? Without prior authorization from the court after showing as to why such contact is necessary and material to the preparation of the defense. The defense, as part of the necessary work, has previously identified family members and work is being conducted. The defense does not expect to use the protected material to identify people to contact without further order of the court. However, the defense needs to continue its investigation with witnesses and resources generated from sources outside of the protected materials. Without worry, the plain language of the protective order could be interpreted to prevent that work. The defense seeks clarification of the specific language of the protective order. On this 8th day of February 2024. Comes now the state of Idaho by and through the Latah County prosecuting attorney and objects to the defendant's motion to change venue as it is premature. The state requests that the court set a trial date, a briefing schedule for defendant's motion, a hearing date for the motion to be heard, and a deadline for supporting memoranda, affidavits, and witness disclosures sufficiently in advance of hearing so that the parties can adequately prepare. Defendant's motion to change venue is premature and without sufficient basis. Bullshit. Defendant has not provided the court with adequate information to conclude that a Latah County jury could not fairly and impartially decide defendant's case in Idaho. A motion for change of venue is within the discretion of the trial court. State versus Wynn. 121 Idaho 850-858-828-879-885-1992. Idaho's appellate courts look to several factors which determining whether a trial court exercised its discretion in deciding a motion to change venue, including affidavits indicating prejudice or an absence of prejudice in the community, and the testimony of the jurors at voir dire as to whether they had formed an opinion of the defendant's guilt or innocence based upon adverse pretrial publicity, i.e., citing State versus Needs 99 Idaho. Other factors for consideration are whether a defendant's challenged for cause any individual jurors, the nature of pretrial publicity, about the case and the duration of time between the publicity and the trial itself. The Idaho Supreme Court has explained that publicity by itself does not require a change of venue. Because publicity is not a standalone reason for a court to change venue, this court should decline to decide defendant's motion until a trial date is set and the court has heard adequate facts to enable the court to make a determination. The state respectfully requests that the court set a trial date, set a hearing date for defendant's motion to change venue, issue deadlines for supporting memoranda and affidavits, and set a deadline for witness disclosure reasonably in advance of hearing. Respectfully submitted on this 8th day of February 2024. I think it's bullshit, guys. He just don't want the trial moved out of the Latah because he knows he can get an easy fucking victory. Damn Bill Thompson. Why shouldn't they move the trial out of Latah County? Latah County is corrupt as all corrupt. He thinks if they move it out of Latah, Mr. Koberger will get off. That's why he's not wanting it moved. Have you guys seen Mr. Koberger sitting there? Brian looks scared to death sitting there in that chair. And we have Mr. Bill Thompson not wanting the trial moved. It's bullshit. And then telling Ann Taylor that she cannot talk to any of Brian's family members. What's up with that?
Going on in my life, and then we get paragraphs and paragraphs from people who sound crazy online talking about gang stalking, but for which I think are actually being followed by task force or undercover operations, maybe without understanding why sometimes. So it might sound like a crazy person to you who is spitting out.
People from 160 countries illegally cross the U.S.-Mexico border and give themselves up.
That the two surviving victims avoid it, and the 3 girls who have the interactions are the ones who wind up murdered. The second thing that blew my mind was the grub truck video. We have the sealed Office of Civil Rights investigation file on the victims, which were sealed in the court. Does that have something to do with the police visiting their residence? Does it have something to do with a possible investigation surrounding the victims or the house?
wall from my front door to the house.
The police department, any affiliated investigators, and the school? Did Haley come back that weekend to exchange goods or services? We're going to get into that old debate again. Drugs or no?
Content warning. The following video contains references to drug use, true crime, and scenes or discussions of violence. Viewer discretion is advised.
The no-no topic. I think so. In terms of police investigations, which we've time and time again discussed, the term Adam is not a person, but a reference to the phonetic alphabet. You could say A for Adam, B is for boy. In LAPD terms, Adam was used as a prefix to denote a two-officer patrol unit. For example, 1 Adam 12 refers to a two-officer patrol car from Division 1. The number 12 doesn't have a specific meaning, and it's mostly used to differentiate different patrol units. This term was popularized by the 1960s TV show Adam 12, and it's a popularized LAPD code. You'll find lots of questions online. Why do cops say Adam so much? Not saying that this is the Adam that they were referring to, but the whole "what'd you tell Adam? I told Adam everything" has been intriguing to anyone, no matter which theorized group you belong to. And of course, I couldn't go without mentioning this particular term. Notably, one of my commenters recently mentioned this. Throw yourself a shout out in the comments because you had your thinking cap on, because I think it's interesting, and it'd be weird for me to have this whole Cops and Ops series without mentioning it. It's also probably a popularized name in religious towns and what have you. So who knows? But I always thought it was just too insane that that would be what she was saying on a random clip that got leaked. Very weird, and how nefarious sounding. Maybe it would be nothing if they didn't go home or allegedly went home for the last time. Speaking of terms, I want to talk about some things that have been popularized and the myths about drug hits that continue on. It's a complex world, and it's often misunderstood. That is drug-related violence. There are many misconceptions that cloud society's understanding. For starters, many believe that drug-related hits are carried out by unfamiliar, distant figures. We're going to talk about that at length, including the fact that everyone miscategorizes any drug hit as a quote-unquote cartel hit. Not true and far from the complex reality of these crimes. Namely, that it's usually a local group, stemming from a local group of nobodies who know each other but deal drugs to the bigger groups that actually traffic and are higher up in the organization. Further, there's a common perception that drug-related hits are strictly professional, detached from personal emotions. This is far from accurate. In fact, these brutal acts often intertwine with crimes of passion, betrayal, personal vendettas, and other emotional conflicts. The lines are often blurred between professional and personal, and they can even be triple grouped in with not just hits but crimes of passion as well as love triangles. All can be interwoven and intertwined in drug-related violence. I see, which is misleading, is that a lot of people seem to think that these hits are carried out only by hitmen with a gun. Maybe that's because of portrayals in the movies, I'm not sure. But contrary to popular culture, in reality, these hits can be much more brutal. Sharp force violence, otherwise known as one of the grim scenarios that can totally be a part of drug-related violence. We see the same thing going on, I think, personally, with these survivors, who we're all called victim blamers for questioning at all. I think if it were any other community and they were any other class, as far as not being college students, we would see a much different environment surrounding not only the people talking about the crimes and the theories, which are considered wild or grounded in reality. The same could be said for calling something a drug den or a trap house, and people often have a misconception that dictates that its appearance must be run down as hell for that to be a popular term surrounding it, which is completely wrong. Even in my episode where I shared with everyone, like, hey, my dad died in a house that the police didn't give a shit about what happened to him in there because of the type of house that it was. And I had people will say like, no, Neeks, you know, if your dad died in the trap house, that a trap house is like a rundown shack. And they didn't say rundown shack, but however they would say, right? So even as I was trying to explain to people, I was still getting comments that the trap house would be some dilapidated, rundown piece of, and that's just not true. It's simply not true. A drug den, a trap house, a party house, they are all essentially places where people gather and drugs are sold and consumed. While some may fit the rundown stereotype, others could be located in seemingly average or even upscale neighborhood. In reality, the purpose of a trap house dictates the appearance, even more so than location. Those running the operation might find it beneficial to maintain a certain level of normalcy, blending into the community. This avoids arousing suspicion. Often, even though they can be considered quote unquote party houses, the number of people is usually held at a certain capacity. So the parties will be somewhat tame in the grand scheme of things, or at least that's the case in a lot of well-kept, nice neighborhood, could still harbor a darker purpose type of trap houses. And even the darker purpose part depends on the eye of the beholder, right? It may be the light of someone else's night in their view anyway. I mean, just kidding. What terms theme? The term cartel being used when related to the Idaho 4 is, in my opinion, incorrect, and it's blowing the drug-related homicide theory out of proportion. So while cartels undoubtedly are involved in violent activities and even homicides, these typically occur in the context of territorial disputes and fights for control over trafficking routes and trafficking areas, but they mainly occur in a cartel's home country. The majority of drug-related crimes in the US, drug use, selling, possession, are more or less linked to the local groups, and sometimes not even groups, but independent operators rather than international drug cartels. Moreover, a lot of people blame the cartels for America's drug problem. And
sick of all the ads like this one? Just head to adskiller.com, click on Activate Now.
drugs trafficked by cartels, of course, do end up in American street. But the main point is that they wind up there through a lot of local intermediaries. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things, cartels do play a role in the international drug trade, but it's an oversimplification to directly link them to all drug-related crime in the US. I get it. I know that the feds love to do this, but hello, they also call the Aryan or white supremacy groups that sell and operate prison gangs, because according to them, they have arrested these groups. And we see that the same can't be said for Sinaloa cartel. The leader of Sinaloa and his sons are in jail, but they don't call the Sinaloa cartel a prison cartel. They don't do any of that for any blood, crip, whatever related group that they have for other organized criminal groups. But as long as it's for white supremacy, right, they're a prison gang. So that was my really long way of saying it's all about politics and the way that they distribute this information. And I think a lot of it sometimes boils down to the wrong ideas that Hollywood puts in people's heads, not just about drug related activity, but also about court in general. Biggest dispute that I see is over one, the knives versus guns, and two, over the survivors actually supposedly making it out of the home without everyone in the house dying. I think that a lot of people tend to underestimate the strategic value of knives, for one thing, and the various circumstances that actually make knives among criminal activity not only an easily accessible weapon, but a strategic and valuable asset as far as discretion and hiding that you're doing criminal shit or that criminal shit is going on. Pop, 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 guns aren't that silent. And who knows if that many hours would have been able to go by before someone would have dialed 911 had the assailant been wielding a gun. And come on, guys, even Hollywood had this one. Dexter, the number one rule that his cop father gave him was don't use a gun, the ballistics, the traceability, etc., etc., etc.
Hey, Adam.
Targeted, it was not targeted. We don't know if it was the residents or the victims that was targeted. Okay, Well, obviously, something's up with his residence. A, we see the police backing it up, which raises the question, do the police own the house? Were they responsible for the lease? Was it one of the victims? Who had the lease in their name? And how come the families have never been able to go out and enter? Who even knows if they want to enter? But I think that a lot of parents would, and it's just a strange situation altogether. Obviously, something is weird about this house. Now, speaking of that, since we don't know what was going on with the house, we really don't know what would be going on as far as a drug hit and there being two survivors. But again, it is simplifying a drug hit to state that everyone would have been murdered had it been drug related, which makes no sense at all. I need you to
Yes, I'm well, Adam. How's my crime cult doing tonight?
think about the following scenarios. A, as I've pointed out before, the police can actually rent a house, have their CI rent a house, have their undercover rent a house, and actually run an operation out of a house. Any regular old house that has a lease available for them to rent. There have been situations where people live with their CIs. There have been situations where people live with undercovers. So to state that everyone would have been murdered is to simplify any of those scenarios. It's also to simplify that you could find out you've been betrayed by your own roommates. Now, in a murder scenario, would you be murdered if you were the one who blew the whistle? Therefore, making someone aware of something that they weren't previously, which could have resulted in a homicide or multiple homicides. In that hypothetical scenario, you could see that there would be and can be and are situations where there are survivors and they're not all murdered, but it can still be a drug related incident. It doesn't make sense to me that it would be something that's not related to some type of operation surrounding the police whenever you consider the lawsuits and then you consider the school is named in that lawsuit, and then you consider how many times the police kept asking for help and noting that they weren't worried about the situations or activities, only on the homicides over and over and over again. We also see somewhat of a silent situation as far as the friends of any of the victims speaking out. We've also thus far seen silence about the party that Kaylee allegedly came back to the house. Allegedly, she was moving out already or had decided not to stay there and had only went back for the weekend. Now, I must point out that Kaylee, coming from Wraith-Drum, was coming from Kootenai County, Idaho, Post Falls, and all of the areas
Hey, Indigo Sleuth, how you doing tonight?
that are just as drug infested as the Boise areas. And sorry to reiterate, but as it's been pointed out by drug investigators for the Idaho and Oregon area, Arizona and Washington are a part of the multi-state groups and even a part of the international drug-related crime in the area. And here we have a house filled with members who are driving home and back and forth from Boise, Kootenai County, i.e. Wraith-Drum, from Arizona, one of the entry points into the country for transnational crime, who was dating someone from Conway, Washington, which is close to the Canadian border. Not to mention that Post Falls itself is not very far from the Canadian border either. You can also see that it's pretty damn close to Spokane. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, this means that whenever traffickers get the drugs from Spokane or larger areas, the further away that they are trafficked, the more the price will get jacked up. So I can imagine that in Moscow, drugs are much higher than they are in Spokane. You can do the math for why that may create a dealer or two when you're broke in college, high school, whatever. Not to mention those that are just grown as fuck and, So again, it'd just be a big mistake to not consider that drug-related incidents and homicides go from crimes of passion to professional hits to a random knife fight in an alley over a small drug debt.
Here's one thing you need to do before you buy anything online. Don't spend another dime on Amazon until you watch this first.
Watch this.
Let's go over some of the bullet point, guys. Number one, the timeline. Exactly how fucked up is the timeline? from 2 a.m. to 2:42 a.m., you hear some weird shit on the Linda Lane footage. And why haven't they released a video showing Brian Christopher Kohlberger's white Elantra parking in front of the house? All right, you have a good night, Indigo.
I can show you how to get the sweetest deals online when you shop from major retailers like Amazon and
Another part that simply must become a part of the Cops and Ops series is all of the hoopla that's been discussed about the same cars that you see at the grub truck. Of course, there are cars circling at the grub truck because many of them are the surveillance team, many of them are the communications team, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of shit going down at the grub truck. Not to mention that fleets of vehicles are involved in organized operations and oftentimes unmarked vehicles too. So that is to say that Idaho State Police will have a certain number of fleet vehicles that they have, and tons of their agents will drive vehicles similar or identical. So I think that is the reason for a lot of the cloned cars and trucks that we're seeing around the Idaho 4 crimes. So it doesn't mean that those vehicles aren't interesting. I'm just saying police fleets and investigative fleets play a vital role in covert investigations and therefore, of course, a part of crimes.
I had left for work like around 11:45 and I never saw or heard anything. The night before I was up till like 2 and never heard anything at all, anything out of the ordinary. Like it's just been crazy with just how quiet it's been.
Yeah.
Because we're used to having like some sort of music, hearing music when
they
we come
always
home
had
from
little
work.
gatherings, so they always had music going. So for us, we never assumed anything different.
Yeah.
Because they're so
This
used to.
house did.
Yeah,
They
they always
say it's a party house.
Not necessarily. They had like small gatherings, maybe like 10 people or so, and it never really got crazy other than like the usual college student stuff. But they were actually pretty respectful, considering.
The house, occasionally there were parties that were kind of loud. Most of the time it was pretty self-contained. But yeah, as I would take my dog in and out to go to the bathroom, I would just be walking by. I would look up and I would see people in the windows almost every night, probably 4 or 5 nights a week. So there were a lot of people that went into and out of that house pretty frequently. So yeah, it was kind of a party house. But again, this whole neighborhood is sort of like a party neighborhood because it's just off campus. So you sort of don't have to follow the university rules.
Another notable that I think belongs in my Cops and Ops series is the stalking incident of Kaylee. Okay, so at first police are putting out over and over again in the police reports that they've not found anything to actually back up these statements that Kaylee possibly had a stalker. Who knows who actually said this? Her family never seemed that interested in it. We know that some dude at the vape shop said that the girls were discussing it whenever Kaylee was there to purchase vape from them. So this could be either one of two things. One, either Kaylee could have been working with police and someone noticed that she always tends to have backup, or someone around, quote unquote, stalking her, right? Surveilling her. So there's also the possibility that those payments that were going to Kaylee from the roommates could have been because, as I said, Kaylee could have been the girl to hit up for goods and services. That doesn't mean anything bad, and people shouldn't feel like she deserved it any more than when they thought she was as pure as the driven or undriven. Yeah, the undriven snow. Whatever. You know what I mean. And I really hate that we're living in a world where I have to throw in this disclaimer, but just so no one gets the wrong idea, she didn't deserve to die. Okay, so moral of that point was that the stalker incident morphs into a statement on the King Road homicide page from the MPD website. And they actually claim on that statement, under the Kaylee Stalker section, it's not funny, but just crazy that there was a section for that. So under that did Kaylee have a stalker section, it reads, quote, using tips and leads, investigators have identified an incident involving Kaylee at a local business, which may have been the stalker reference she made to friends and family. In mid-October, two males were seen inside a local business. They parted ways, and one male appeared to follow Kaylee inside the business. As she exited to walk toward her car, the male turned away, and it did not appear that he made any contact with her. Detectives contacted both males and learned that the two were attempting to meet women at the business, and this was corroborated through additional investigation. Based on the available information, detectives believe that this is an isolated incident and not an ongoing pattern of stalking. No evidence suggests that the two males were involved in the murders. Investigators continue looking into information about Kaylee having a stalker. Information about a potential stalker or unusual occurrences should go through the tip line, unquote. Okay, so assuming that this was like another controlled buy, the two males were observed entering a business separately, with one of them appearing to follow Kaylee. The observed behavior where two individuals separate, with one acting as a potential distraction while the other follows a target. Yeah, it sounds kind of similar to the tactics used in a controlled buy. In a typical controlled buy, one person would engage the suspect, this could be Kaylee in this situation, while the other observes from a distance, ready to intervene if necessary. The act of one male following Kaylee inside and outside the business resembles surveillance and those aspects often found in controlled buy operations, and or insert undercover operations where they surveil any target. Now, a question that I would raise here is how in the hell, months into the investigation, did we even get this update? And what were police searching that made them find a random surveillance video from mid-October, which included Kaylee and two men who later were questioned by MPD? That's weird to me. That's weird as hell to me, actually. But who cares what's weird to me? Oh, this is my series? Oh, damn. Okay, I guess I'm supposed to put what I find weird here. To reiterate what I've typed in comments to people, I don't believe that gang stalking is real. That's not to say that I don't believe people have seen these actions, but I believe the term gang stalking is often construed with conspiracy theory because it's the wrong term. I believe that often innocent Americans, I know for a fact actually that innocent Americans are followed by task force and undercover agencies all the time. And I get that people don't feel like they're involved in enough or involved in anything at all to be experiencing these types of operations going on around them. But I think that that does happen, and that unfortunately has been noted by the government and legal analysts alike, that all agree that yes, this happens to innocent individuals. And so what happens is people are like, who the hell is this? What's going on in my life? And then we get, paragraphs and paragraphs from people who sound crazy online talking about gang stalking, but for which I think are actually being followed by task force or undercover operations, maybe without understanding why sometimes. So it might sound like a crazy person to you who is spitting out, no, I see them, it's the same person, or I see the same car, or whatever. But these are real experiences that people are going through. And I just think that socially, online, and in forums, the terms get misconstrued and, of course, misaligned with being only the babblings of a crazy person when they could just be being crazy observant about weird and odd groups that they feel like are stalking them. So I think it warrants the question, did Kaylee feel like she was being stalked? Was it because a task force was investigating her, or was it because she was a part of a task force? Who knows? But it definitely at least warrants the question. As we're winding down this episode, I believe that it's worth questioning why the gag order was in place on the family, why the particular changes in that gag order was made, why it was amended to include the attorneys of parents and parents themselves, parents of the victims. The amended order expanded on the original order and placed the restriction to all attorneys representing witnesses, victims, or victims' families, not just prosecution or defense and or investigators. Additionally, the amended order expanded on the types of prohibited statements. It prohibited any statement on the character or criminal record of any party, victim, or witness, as well as statements revealing the identity of a witness. It also prohibited any statements regarding the expected testimony of any party, victim, or witness, which I find to be very strange amendments for a gag order. On top of that, I find the gag order being a perfectly reasonable excuse to everyone for the reason and the crazy statements or investigators and other people declining to make statements due to the gag order is quite ridiculous that the public sees that as feasible, since many of these questions would not be breaking the gag order. They were telling reporters they couldn't answer if the community was safe due to the gag order. Like, GTFO, out of town, that's insane. As for the latest insanity with the case, it is the school yet again deciding to tear down the house. Now, I get it. If this was anybody else's house, I would not be looking at you sideways for continuing on in your real estate endeavors with the house. But the moral of the story is that the university doesn't need it for any real estate purpose. They don't need it as a part of being an asset for the school. And it seems pretty privileged to me to call it a grim reminder of the heinous deaths before the trial has started. It just sounds privileged, and the way that it's worded for those who may have a connection to the house. Yeah, they may have a connection to the house, and the sun also may rise tomorrow. I mean, WTF? I don't know. It's just weird. Weird, weird, weird. The house has been weird from jump, including the fact that the so-called defendant was the one moving the court to preserve it as they went to cleaning it while he's still on an airplane on his way to Idaho in the first place. An insult to injury, the state's movement for the trial to happen at a time that's convenient for them, which according to them includes while the schools are out of classes and out of that semester, and to wait until the high school, which apparently is close to the court, as well as the university, to be inactive during the trial. I mean, last I checked, trials were supposed to come as speedy as they could to a possible defendant, and those were the things that were supposed to be taken into account, not when the school is in or out, or how the public being interested in the case and parking for the media would be taken into account. It is kind of mind-blowing to me.
So what have we learned so far? Let me know in the live chat. What have we learned about this case? One is a jacked up case. For two, the timeline's all screwed up. For three, there could be an innocent man sitting there in that chair. And I honestly believe he is innocent. Can't change my mind on that. And did the FBI violate his father's First Amendment rights by taking that trash without a search warrant? Because technically, you need a search warrant to retrieve trash. Unless they were so locked in on Brian, they thought that they didn't need a search warrant. They've been locked in on Brian since day one. I think that those 2 stops in Indiana were controlled stops so they could get his touch DNA. Because if you notice, the cop that took his license was wearing gloves, rubber gloves. What do you think, Adam, if you're still here in chat? I think this whole case is jacked up. And then the prosecuting attorney throwing the biggest bitch fit because they're wanting the case moved because he thinks that there's no probable cause to move the case out of Latah County. He doesn't think that there's corruption in Latah County. He thinks he can get a clean jury pulled out of Latah County. I didn't know you were a musician, Snow. Oh, in the last video I released, it has come to my attention that I mistakenly said the Range Rover was Maddie's when it was actually Kaylee's. I'm sorry for any mix up. I was researching all night, so I've been running on no sleep today. Oh, you were in the Paramount documentary, Snow? But for anyone who watched my last video, I do apologize. I meant to say Kaylee. Apparently, I said Maddie. Hey, Snow, you want to come up on panel for about 10 minutes? Oh, okay, Adam. I'm sorry. I haven't seen the Paramount documentary yet. I don't know, Adam. I haven't seen it yet. Oh, wow. I had a really good panel last night with Sophie and Pia. Did you guys like the panel last night? I thought it was really awesome panel last night. But yeah, this whole case is screwed up. You've got the timeline that's screwed up, guys. Yeah, the video I did earlier, I was researching where Zen and Ethan were. And in the timeline, it it stated they were at the Sigma Chi from 8 to 9, and then from 9 to 1:45, their timeline went missing. So there's a 5-hour gap in Xana and Ethan's whereabouts. So how can Bethany state that she was with them at the Sigma Chi house from 9 o'clock to 1:45 when Ethan and Xana left the Sigma Chi party at 9? They were there at 8, but they left at 9. And from 9 to 1:45, there is a 5-hour gap where their whereabouts is unknown. They show back up at the house at 1:45. So where'd they go for 5 hours? And was Bethany lying about seeing them over at the Sigma Chi house from 9 to 1:45 when they actually left at 9? Where was Dylan that night? Her whereabouts was unknown. We know where Maddie and Kaylee were. They were at the corner club and then they went to the grub truck. What do you think, Snow? There's something, guys, there's something going on behind the scenes there that they're not wanting us to know about. I don't know what it is. I'd like to know what it is. But it's just fishy. Real fucking fishy. But I'd like to thank Debbie for that $2 super sticker. You still in chat, Snow? Just everything is getting really, really fishy and iffy. Like, why was Ann Taylor told not to talk to none of Brian's family members? What is the prosecutor afraid of? Why isn't he allowing the defense to talk to Brian's own family? It just makes you wonder. Yes, Adam, and I'd like to know the same thing. Why? Why isn't the prosecutor wanting Ann Taylor to talk to Brian's family? Yes, Dad, it is all sus. And the prosecutor threw a fit because Ann Taylor put that change of venue in. So he put a motion in to deny the change of venue because he thinks that he can get a clean jury pool out of Latah County, and he doesn't want the trial moving out of Latah. where Ann Taylor stated in her motion that the jury pool there in Moscow is corrupted because of all the pretrial publicity. And the prosecutor doesn't think that the jury pool is corrupted. He doesn't think there's pretrial publicity when everyone knows that there is. I will, Amy, I will. Everything in this case, Theta, is sus. Everything. Amy, do you mean play a Jay Embry video? Is he here on YouTube? Yes, they do need to move out that town for sure. That's what Ann Taylor's trying to do, but she's being cock blocked by the prosecution. No, the family did not hire the prosecution. The prosecution is the state.
Imagine making $453,000 in a single month as an affiliate marketer without relying on Google, Facebook, or ClickBank, or creating new accounts on Pinterest.
Welcome to The Revealing. I'm again your host, Pavati. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to go into a lot more detail about the organizations that's involved in this, that law enforcement is targeting, so that you have a better understanding of who's really behind this event. And once again, I'm not here to slander anybody. This is just pure speculation based on the media narrative and the narrative that a lot of you at home have investigated. So I'm not going to use any names in this. So this is just for fun, but I do want people to really understand the details involved in something like this so that they can have a clear perspective of what they're watching. Okay, so let's talk first of all about what I'm calling an organization. When you have a town like Moscow, Idaho, well, that town is a college town. It does have a college. It does have a lot of other residents as well. And I haven't dived into the numbers. Maybe I'll do that for you. But I imagine that since they have enacted a drug task force, that the drug arrests in that area are significant. They wouldn't put together a drug task force if it wasn't. In fact, a drug task force, just so you understand, It is a specific group of law enforcement personnel, usually consisting of some detectives, undercover personnel, as well as some uniformed officers that are assigned specifically to a task. So once a task force is formed, they have one task, the task force. And their task is to put a dent in the drug crimes in their specific county. Now, a drug task force may operate in a county or possibly 2 counties, or maybe even sometimes 3 counties. They call that a tri-county task force. Typically doesn't get bigger than 3 counties because that's too large of an area for them to adequately investigate. The drug task force is going to target low-level dealers, mid-level distributors. Their ultimate goal is to climb up the chain of command to the people who are actually operating an organization in their area. Now, there's also people I'm going to refer to as independents. Okay, so an independent is an individual who will go to another city or county, purchase a large amount of drugs, come back to their county, and then work as typically a low-level distributor / dealer. Okay, now, although they will focus in on individuals such as this, they do want to make that arrest. It's not their ultimate goal, because once they make that arrest, climbing up the chain stops with that arrest. They're kind of the highest level in that particular scenario, because the task force is not allowed to operate outside of the counties that they're assigned to. So if somebody's going to another county to make a purchase, then all the task force at that point could do is refer the information they have to the county that person's traveling to. So they're not really much of a use in that specific scenario. What they are a use in, though, is things that are occurring in their counties. And they go about this type of operation in a few different ways. One way is by using people who are arrested on low-level drug possession charges, and that's 90% of the arrests that are made in the drug world when it, as it relates to law enforcement. They're going to pull somebody over or have somebody involved in some type of incident, and they're going to have small quantity of drugs on them, and they will arrest them. And the drug task force will then get with those individuals, try to scare them as much as they can, maybe offer them some type of relief from charges for them to give them information, or even possibly set up people higher in the chain than they are, which in most cases would be a dealer, a low-level dealer. So you'll have a low-level dealer. You have the drug user, obviously, down here, the low-level dealer. Then you have a distributor. The distributors are involved in higher quantities. They supply the dealers. And then above the distributor is what I'm going to refer to as the house. Okay, the house has the large amount of drugs that supply the distributors, and they also employ all the upper-level personnel. This could be anything from the couriers that bring the large quantities in from wherever they get the large quantities from. They travel from there to the house with the large quantities. They're also going to have other personnel such as intelligence. They'll have people in the community that are paid off that, perhaps are in law enforcement, in city council positions. You have people that can do things for them and keep eyes off of them, and also be able to give them the intelligence they need to know when law enforcement is moving in on them or getting close.
I don't know.
They would also have attorneys that would represent them if something happened, attorneys that assist in laundering profits made from the drug trade. And they would also have attorneys for intelligence. When people are arrested and they are talking, they would want some attorneys that represent those people to be able to give them the information that they need to know who's talking so that they can adjust their operations accordingly. So the task force will take the low-level drug users who are arrested, try to move up the chain to the distributors, arrest them, try to get them to turn on people higher than them, and they just continue to move up the chain. And if that chain of that organization is in their county, then that's a big focus for them. Now, there may be multiple larger organizations working in the county that are in the same business, but their specific goal is to investigate as much as they can to get up that chain to try to take those people down. So,
Look, they're even hiring freelance tax experts on Fiverr.
Man, it probably works better than how we do our taxes here.
So the mothers of the two young ladies that lived at that Idaho house were both, as I mentioned before, arrested. And I'm going to assume that their position in this organization was the courier positions, because they were both arrested, separate occasions. I'm not saying that they even knew each other, but they were arrested doing the same thing, transporting a large quantity of drugs from one area to the counties involved in Moscow, Idaho. And when they were arrested, they were charged with some pretty significant offenses. And the attorney that represented both of them, again assigned by the public defender's office, probably requested the cases because she's there for intelligence, and she wanted to represent these people so that the organization would know what's going on with them. Are they talking? Are they not talking? What are they saying? And that would be the person that would be able to provide that information. So with these ladies waiting on their court date, that once again was, both of their court dates were, I believe, they were both coming up a few days prior to the events that happened in the Idaho case. So they may have kept their mouths shut for a long time waiting on that trial date. And as it was coming due, they got scared and they tried to make a deal.
Sorry,
They tried to get their charges reduced to maybe provide a little information on that organization. And their attorney would absolutely have that information. The attorney would pass it along to the organization. The organization would look to send a message. Now, with both of their mothers being involved in the drug trade in Moscow, Idaho, and we can be fairly certain that they were involved in the drug trade in Moscow, Idaho, because they were both charged in the same county in Moscow, Idaho. You know, they're both being represented by the same attorney. So if they're involved in the drug trade in that town, and both of their daughters are in college in that town, and you can draw as many lines as you want to from the mothers to the daughters. I mean, everybody says that house was a party house. Where were they getting their drugs? They may have been at the bottom of the food chain.
Theta, you're not stupid.
I would assume that organization would know people that were at the bottom of the food chain that probably spent a lot of time in that house that could provide them with intelligence that they needed to carry out the task that they had, which was to send the message to those mothers. How are they going to send the message? Doing the worst thing that they could possibly do, which is to eliminate their daughters.
It's Jane. It's Jay.
Once they made that deal with law enforcement,
want to come on panel, Strange, so we can discuss it.
The word was sent to the organization from that attorney. The organization set somebody in motion to send the message. And I believe that person was Brian Koberger. Now, Mr. Koberger, again, let's talk about him for a minute. He's a criminal psychologist. Okay. I've already discussed in a previous video how many years of education And somebody left in the comments, student loans, yeah, the cost of that education was significant. The dedication to that education was very significant. We're talking 8 years of higher education to have a criminal psychologist degree, criminal psychology, a PhD, to be a doctor in criminal psychology. What purpose could you
His name is Jay
possibly
Embry.
come up with
It's
to
up on
invest
his
all that
YouTube
time and
channel.
money to have that type of occupation? Because I can't think of many occupations that actually go along with criminal psychologists. If you can, then I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say. But again, the only occupations I can think of is behavioral sciences unit for the FBI, maybe Homeland Security. Those positions, I imagine, are few and far between. And coming straight out of school with a PhD in criminal psychology is probably not adequate to fill one of those positions. I imagine experience in law enforcement would be necessary. But if you think about the knowledge acquired in an education such as that, and you begin to think about how you could apply that in this manner, what kind of knowledge would Kohberger have to be able to apply in a case like this, to be able to carry out the task and potentially not get caught? I mean, a criminal psychologist would obviously be educated on law enforcement personnel's tactics, their methods of operation as far as investigating, gathering evidence, but also forming a profile for the assailant that committed the acts. In fact, he would know exactly what to do to try to point law enforcement in a completely different direction than an individual such as himself. Somebody with that type of education would absolutely want this crime scene to look like.
It's like the Garden of Eden. It's a real place.
How do you know it's a real place?
I was there.
An incel stalker who hated women focused in on these young ladies, and then in a serial killer fashion blindly went in and pulled a Ted Bundy and left, and wanted law enforcement to be thinking that's what happened and move in that direction. The last thing that he would want them to think is it was a message sent from an organization to keep somebody from talking, because that would send up way too many red flags for law enforcement, and that would get them on their heels on guess who? The organization that was involved. Now, I believe over the course of the investigation, probably pretty early, that people were talking to law enforcement. The task force was probably, and I believe I've seen a video of some interesting individuals, maybe with cowboy hats, that at one point after these crimes happened, went in to do a investigation into the house, and they didn't look like normal, law enforcement personnel, normal investigators. They looked kind of like what I would expect a drug task force to look like. And they went into the house and did a brief investigation and then left, and some reporters tried to ascertain who they were, and they didn't want to say, which again makes me believe that they were part of that drug task force. So the information law enforcement obviously ascertained fairly quickly was the true reason for this crime. And again, that's why I believe it was the second or the third day that the chief of police came out and gave a press conference and said, the community is safe. Nobody worry. This was a targeted attack. Nobody else is in danger. Now, if this was a crazed stalking, serial killing maniac who randomly picked out some victims and broke into their house randomly and assaulted them to the point to where they're no longer with us. Well, that would be real cause for the community to be worried, to say the least. Not, it's a targeted attack, nobody worry, everything's fine. Because that's exactly what they said. And they said what they meant too. Because nobody else was in danger. It was a targeted attack, and they know that. How they got to Kohberger, that remains to be seen. My thoughts are that Kohberger did drive his vehicle to the scene. He wisely turned his phone off, because if you watch any episode of First 48, the first thing they do is take the suspect's cell phone. They pull up cell records, who'd they call, who'd they text, pull up their area locators, where were they at. And with the phone off or in airplane mode, none of that's really going to be available. All they can tell is, well, he was in the general area. The phone pinged off of this tower or this tower, but not like if the phone was on. They could tell exactly where he went, where and how long he stayed there, and where he went after that. And they didn't have that information. So I believe he did drive his car. They seen his car on a few videos away from the house, figured out probably from some informants that it was him, and then they focused their investigation in on him. But in the end, the organization is responsible for this. Kohberger's just the hand that dealt the cards. And I've had some other comments that Kohberger doesn't seem like the hitman character in a lot of the movies that you see. He seems more like the American Psycho character. Well, he does kind of resemble Christian Bale, I guess, in that character. But
hey, Jeff, you want to come on panel?
I'll give you another movie to watch. And I assure you, you go watch this movie, and then you relate the hitman character in this movie to Kohberger. And other than the fact that he's a billionaire and he has some pretty attractive, well, he has a pretty attractive woman that wants to be with him. I think you can see where I'm going with the Kohberger character. It's uncanny. And that movie is starring The Rock. It's called Faster. Came out a few years back. Give that movie a watch and then think about Mr. Kohberger, and I think that'll open your eyes. So that's all I'm going to say on this video. I still have one more that's coming.
There's the link for you,
and
Jeff.
The last one, I'm going to save all the best for last. But again, I'm just painting a picture of a story that possibly happened. Again, I'm Pavarotti. Check it out.
Theta, I was asked to play that by Amy True Crime. Hey, Jeff, come on panel. I sent you a link. You just don't want to go for 4 hours again, do you, Jeff? Yeah, Pia, 10 minutes is okay with me because I think that's all I can spare that day is 10 minutes. Oh, I understand, Theta. I'm pretty sure, Jeff, we can keep it to 20 minutes tonight. We have such a good dialogue, though, Jeff. When you come up. What do you mean, Theta? Yeah, I know, Theta. Yeah. Oh, I know the parents don't seem sad. That's kind of odd. They seem mad, not sad. Yeah. Kayakers, father. What do you mean, Theta? Yeah, that's true. Theta, that's true. I know. It's all wrong in weird ways. See what else this guy has to say. See what else he has to say.
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. Once again, I'm your host, Pavarotti, bringing you information on the Idaho 4 case. Once again, this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is my opinions based on the evidence that's been provided through the law enforcement narrative, the media narrative, and the excellent home investigative work that a lot of you online have done. I take y'all's evidence and then I put together the most plausible scenario. Now, today I am going to add some speculation of my own. It's not based on any evidence. I don't like to do that, but I feel it's necessary to really get my aspect of this case explained properly. And I'm also going to touch on some of the things
Oh,
that I
yeah, I
discussed in my
know.
last video. As we discussed in the last video, it would be very difficult for somebody to commit these atrocities on multiple individuals in a home such as it took place in without the victims screaming and alerting the other residents in the home. It's very hard to get our minds around that aspect. It is, at least it is for me. So the scenario that I'm going to present to you may answer some of those questions that you have about this scenario. Now let's start with Mr. Koberger. Now we've already established Mr. Koberger has an extensive education. He's a very dedicated individual as he went through all the obstacles that one has to go through to obtain that education, years and years of sacrifice, dedication, study. I mean, it's no easy feat. I also believe that Mr. Koberger studied in other areas because I believe that he had a plan as he went through his studies to aspire to be something. And that something is frankly, to normal folks out there like you and me, it's not something that anybody needs to aspire to be. Okay. Now we established that in high school, he began boxing, got into fitness. This enabled him to lose upwards of 100 pounds. I'm also going to discuss some things later in this video that contributed to his 100-pound weight loss as
Right,
well.
Data.
But when somebody studies boxing, and I'm assuming that he put some effort into it because it seems that everything he does, he puts effort into, he obtained some skills, some real skills in boxing. That's not an easy one to dabble into. I'm willing to bet that over the years, if somebody was to really deep dive into Mr. Koberger's past, I would imagine that he's studied in other aspects of hand-to-hand combat, possibly MMA, jiu-jitsu. I'm almost certain that he studied in eskrima. Now, eskrima is hand-to-hand combat, particularly with edged weapons. Now, anybody that's ever been in the military and has gone through basic training knows that there's typically a 3-day course, if you will, on hand-to-hand combat, particularly with edged weapons, and that is an eskrima training. In battle, if it gets down to the guns are not there and you're in close combat, that's why the U.S. Marine Corps carry that K-bar knife. Okay, and there is about a 3-day training in basic training camp that teaches them how to engage with that weapon. They don't spend more than 3 days because typically when you engage with a bladed instrument against another individual with a bladed instrument, it doesn't turn out well for either of you. Okay, and the military knows this, but they do provide some training. Now, somebody like Mr. Koberger, I would imagine, would study much deeper than a 3-day course. And when you start to really get into the art of eskrima, it's going to teach you not to engage with just a knife.
I don't know,
But
Theta. That's a good
eskrima
question.
is blades in both hands. So it teaches your hands and the instrument in your hands to become as one. And with a lot of practice and study in this art, you can really obtain some deadly skills. Now that's my speculation that he has studied in eskrima. What's probably not speculation is during his course of study of almost 8 years in college, even though he was, going for a psychology degree, criminal justice, criminal psychologist. Well, when you go to the university, you're also studying a lot of other subjects. You don't just study the subject that you're wanting to get a degree in. I mean, you do have to take math courses, science courses. I'm willing to bet during his studies that Mr. Koberger who was obviously a very good student. I watched an interview with somebody that went to college with him, and he was discussing how Mr. Koberger led the whole class on a biology paper. So he's a very good student. I'm willing to bet that he studied anatomy. And by studying anatomy, you would learn how to silence an individual fairly quickly. And there's really two ways to do it with a bladed instrument. One is, of course, to sever the vocal cords. You know, that's a strike to right where the vocal cords are. Now, that is a very technical strike. You can miss the vocal cords very easily. In the information that they put out there from the autopsy, the only person that really had a strike such as this was the young man downstairs. Okay. The young lady downstairs, according to what they put out there in the narrative, her strikes were of a different type of bladed weapon than the young ladies upstairs. And we'll discuss that more here in just a minute. But the other way to silence an individual with a bladed weapon is a precision strike up through the rib cage into the lung, whether it's through the front or through the rear. With that type of strike, the air is restricted. And without air, you cannot activate your vocal cords. You cannot make any sound. So the perpetrators that committed these atrocities, I believe, were very knowledgeable when it comes to how to silence their victims with a bladed weapon. Now,
I'm partnering up with Adobe to show you guys some of the new features they just released in Adobe Express. In my videos, I love to use transitions, and they just...
Nothing in this world is going to make me believe that Mr. Koberger is different floors, assassinate 4 different people without them making a sound.
You notice he said perpetrators, not just one.
The king of the ninjas. So nothing's going to really get me to believe that. And I don't believe law enforcement believes that either. However, the narrative that law enforcement puts out there has to agree with the evidence that they're going to present in trial against Mr. Koberger. They may know many things, but there's a big difference between knowing something and having admissible evidence to prove someone's guilt. They can know all kinds of stuff, but they can't present it in trial at court. So the narrative that law enforcement puts out is obviously going to be tailored to the evidence that they're going to present against Mr. Koberger in court. Here's what I believe happened. On that night, Mr. Koberger, they said, left his apartment sometime after 2, drove to Moscow, Idaho. They say these crimes were committed somewhere between 4 and 4:20, somewhere in that area. And they believe he finally parked his car near the residence about 4 a.m. They also believe that before he parked his car, he made several passes around that residence. 3, I believe, to be exact. I don't remember the exact times. They say
he said that he doesn't believe there's just one.
His apartment at 2 in Moscow. It's only 10 minutes away. I mean, 2 in Washington. It's only 10 minutes away to Moscow. That leaves a lot of time between 2 and 4 o'clock. Now, the law enforcement narrative is the passes that he was making around this residence were some type of reconnaissance passes. Okay. Like he's driving by to see what's going on in the house from the road and trying to ascertain if it's safe for him to enter. We've already discussed how ridiculously stupid that is. Here's what I believe happened. The passes around the residence would make more sense if the first pass was to get a visual gauge on the residence. The second pass was him dropping off an assistant, if you will, to go and do real reconnaissance through the windows, get an idea what's going on while Mr. Koberger continues to drive around. That assailant could ascertain if the young lady's bedroom doors were open, or were they shut? Were they locked? Was the back door open? If not, was the front door open? Were the residents up and having a good time, or were they bedded down? That would be the kind of knowledge that somebody would need to execute what happened in this case. Now, Mr. Koberger's phone was either turned off, left at the apartment, put in airplane mode. Nobody really knows. Does that mean Mr. Koberger had no way to communicate? As I'm going to explain a little bit later in this video, Mr. Koberger more than likely had another phone. Wasn't registered to him. He used that phone for business. Now, a phone that's not registered to him would not be known by law enforcement, even by the FBI. Even an unmasking by the CIA is not going to tell them that Mr. Koberger is using that phone. In the old days, they called them burner phones, but they are still around today, I assure you. And I'm willing to bet Mr. Koberger had his burner phone. His partner in crime had his burner phone, and that's how they were able to communicate. That third pass was Mr. Koberger picking up his partner. Then when they go and park their vehicle on the last pass, that's when both of them enter the residence. One goes upstairs, one goes downstairs. The one that goes upstairs is assigned to go first. He goes in, commits the atrocity in just the way that I explained, silently. Once the assailant downstairs is confirmed that he has done his business, he goes in and he commits the same atrocity. I believe he hits the young gentleman with the blow to the neck that disables his vocal cords. And in a very swift manner, again, they have blades in both hands. In a very swift manner, he assaults the young lady.
Every planet except one, which is the pyramid planet. There is a planet that's a pyramid. The shape of it is a pyramid. It's
with the knife blow through the ribs into the lungs. He finishes off the young man. And then as he's going to finish off the young lady who is struggling in pain, trying to breathe, he says, "Don't worry, I'm going to help you." Meaning I'm going to help you get out of the rest of the pain that you're in. I'm going to go ahead and put you out of your misery. The assailant upstairs heads through the back door. As the other assailant is heading to the back door, the other young lady opens the door and gets a look at him. Now, was that Mr. Koberger or was that his partner? Well, the only evidence they can possibly give is he had bushy eyebrows, which I think about maybe 40% of the population could be described as having bushy eyebrows. So it could have been either one. Either way, they exit the residence and they're gone. The crime has happened. It's over. Did one of them leave their K-bar knife sheath? No. No. When I say law enforcement will manufacture evidence, law enforcement will absolutely manufacture evidence. Now, I'm not trying to slander law enforcement. I don't believe law enforcement will manufacture evidence on a young college student that's working real hard to get his psychology degree and has never committed a crime in his life. I absolutely do not believe that they will go and set up some poor innocent guy like Mr. Koberger to take the fall in a 4-count capital murder case. It just isn't going to happen. They're not evil people. Law enforcement is not evil people. However, if they get intelligence and they back up that intelligence with circumstantial evidence, and they gather enough information for them to know for certain who the perpetrator is, or who one of the perpetrators are, then if they cannot find the corroborating evidence to be able to obtain a conviction, they will absolutely manufacture evidence. And that's why that knife sheath was placed there. That's why it took so long to get DNA results back from it, because those DNA results were planted later. And you know how the story goes from there. Now, one of the main reasons I believe that Mr. Koberger didn't do this alone was not because it would be hard to be capable of that by yourself, even if you were, very, very, very efficient. You'd have to be a ninja. But Mr. Koberger also made some mistakes. He did drive his own vehicle. He was seen by cameras. There may be other evidence that comes out later against him that
I agree with you.
proves his guilt circumstantially. But here's why Mr. Koberger made the errors that he did. Because Mr. Koberger is a heavy methamphetamine user.
Oh, I know, Theta. I know.
Now, how do we know that? Well, when you lose 100 pounds, typically substances are involved unless you are just very, very good at dieting and exercise, which you may well have been back then. But when you're going to school,
Step into Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises.
to get your PhD takes up a lot of time. You have to study, takes up a lot of time. And then also he was working as a teaching assistant, trying to earn a little extra money. That's a big responsibility. That's almost like a full-time job, being a teacher's assistant, because you're basically doing
that's cool,
90% of the work of the professor, including grading all the papers, including holding discussions with the class. You have to be very prepared to hold a class discussion or a seminar or whatever you want to call it with a room full of college students. You can't go into those without a lot of preparation, and that takes time and effort. Mr. Koberger's days were full from start to finish. However, Mr. Koberger's alibi defense in this case, which has been made public to everyone, is at nighttime, he frequently just liked to drive around. Just like to get in my car at nighttime and I'd drive around, all hours of the night until in the morning. Did it very often. Okay. Well, how do you go to school all day, study, fulfill the duties of a teacher's assistant, and then get home, and instead of going to sleep, you stay up all night driving around town until in the morning when you go back to school and you start all over again? Insomnia is absolutely an inadequate excuse for that. And what really solidified this for me is watching an interview that a news reporter did with one of his neighbors. I absolutely believe everything she said. She was an Asian lady. And as they were asking her about Mr. Koberger, the one thing that she mentioned that was very important to her was the fact that he made a lot of noise up there at nighttime. All hours of the night, he would wash his clothes, he would vacuum all night long. Now, how is Mr. Koberger staying up all night long, vacuuming, doing clothes, doing everything else, driving all over the world, and never going to sleep, and then going to school all day and fulfilling the duties of a teacher's assistant? Well, there's only one way he can do that, folks. And let me tell you, that's with methamphetamine.
Yeah, that's true.
Nothing else is going to give him the ability to do that day after day. That also is the connection between Mr. Koberger and the organization that I've been speaking of. What is he doing all hours of the night? He's probably not out trying to obtain his drugs, because Mr. Koberger, I would imagine, had very tight finances. A drug habit like that it's not gonna last too long without some money, or without the ability to obtain what he wants through other means. I believe Mr. Koberger was a collector for this organization. They would send him out to collect debts owed to them. That's why he was an easy pick when it came to sending the message to these young ladies. Excuse me, not sending the message to the young ladies, but sending the message through these young ladies to the people that the message was really supposed to be sent to, which was their mothers. And when I say their mother and their stepmother, okay, just to clarify. But that also would send a message to anybody else out there that was considering making a deal with that drug task force. That turns out it's actually a 4-county drug task force, which is a really big one. That means they really have some serious drug
I agree,
problems up there.
Theta.
And again, that's why this investigation, the narrative is so important for them. And as bad as this sounds, a narrative of a Ted Bundy, random Ted Bundy, randomly committing an atrocity on college students is a much better narrative for that drug task force, because they're working on a much larger investigation with many, many more individuals that can be implicated in those crimes. And that's what's important to them, but also to that college and that town, because the entire town, their economy is based on that university. Now, if you have a university that hits the headlines that there is a rampant drug problem with crime organizations that are
Maybe the
eliminating
cops are dirty, Theta.
young college students, now that is a university that parents will not send their children to. Oh no, I'm not sending you there. There are drugs everywhere. They're killing the kids. That is not a safe place. We'll send you to another university. A creepy psycho Ted Bundy commits an atrocity. Well, that's a one-off. That could happen anywhere in the United States. So the narrative is very, very important to not only law enforcement, but also the college, the community that the college is in. Everybody's economy is tied to this university. So with that being said, I think I've discussed too much in this video. I've got a few more that I'm going to continue to explain my perspective on this. And again, my final video will bring it all together. I'll take all aspects of my theory from start to finish, every aspect of it, and wrap it up into a bow with one huge piece of evidence that nobody has put together yet. And I'm not going to put that one out there until the last video. So with that being said, once again, thank you for watching.
Let's see what else this raving Yahoo has to say.
Si tu cuarto de hotel es la recámara,
el gimnasio y el comedor.
Hello to this Friday edition of The Revealing. Once again, I'm your host, Pavarotti. Now today, this is going to be a quick video, and I'm supposed to be going through your comments and your questions and addressing some of those, and I plan on doing that a little bit more in detail this weekend. But as I went through the comments over several of my videos, one comment struck me. Let's just say it struck me more than the others, and it was a simple comment. It said, Pavarotti, this case is not a movie. And when I read that, it made me smile just a little bit, because we all know in this day and age that art imitates life, and in some cases, life imitates art imitating life. So with that being said, what I want to do before I really get into my next video, which is on the attorney, and that's the one that I'm really going to drive home for y'all. But I want to give y'all a homework assignment. It's Friday. You got the weekend. And let me see if I can give you something to do that'll help you with my perspective on this entire case. So my homework assignment for you is I have 4 movies for you to watch. Now, not one of these movies is going to explain my theory in this case, but parts of all 4 of these movies, it will greatly contribute to my perspective. Now, my perspective on this case is not coming from movies, I assure you, but these movies will help you to see some of the aspects of my perspective. Now, it's important for you to watch these movies in this particular order, and I'm going to give you some aspects of each one for you to look out for and see if it makes sense to you. Okay, the first movie, and y'all may have seen some of these before. If you have, great. Watch them again, but this time watch them with the perspective of this case and my theory in mind, okay? Now, the first movie I want you to watch, it'll give you kind of a perspective when I talk about the drug task force involvement of this case, okay? That movie's Rush.
Shoot.
Patrick, Jennifer Jason Leigh, but Rush is a movie about law enforcement who goes undercover in a small community, and they're attacking the drug issues, okay? As you watch the movie, though, the perspective I want you to gather from this, and you really have to watch the entire movie because it won't become crystallized until the very end of the movie. And that is the objective of law enforcement in their case. Okay, they go through what happens as far as working their way up the chain, trying to get to the main.
In today's episode, some of you are going to think I've lost my mind, but I'm only in pursuit of the truth. Some of you out there have thought this might be drug-related, and you might not be wrong. I've also discovered potential connections to the cult of Odin, and this was allegedly a retaliation sacrifice. Yeah. Seriously, I've uncovered some bones and a family tree. Now let's see what I have to say for myself this time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Crime Circus. My name's Drip Drop, and I'll be your host as always. In this episode, I'm going to show you some connections that I found that might just leave you breathless, allegedly. But first, I'd like to clear up some misconceptions and confusions on my previous video, Ladders and Tunnels. Here, I present you a picture from the very beginning of the investigation. In fact, it's from my very first Moscow, Idaho video that I ever recorded. It's a layout of the house, linked down below. This image was taken on the very first day of the investigation. Look at this. This is very red. This was right after. This was before it snowed. Some of you doubters out there were a little confused and said, "Drip drop, it's snow." No, this was before it snowed. You can see right here, look how red it is. And this photo has not been altered or manipulated in any way whatsoever. I don't do that to any of the photos that I include in these videos. These are authentic and original as I find them. Now let's have a look-see down here at the ladder. You can see it is placed the proper, correct way up against the house so you could climb up it. Some of you were confused because at some point the police had turned it around so nobody could climb up the ladder. Yeah, boom. I was right once again. We can't always all be right all the time, but I'm usually right. Some of you were confused and thought that might have been a police ladder that CSI brought to the scene. Well, now let me present you this exhibit that was taken months prior to the crime actually happening. The ladder is at the house, and it's laying on its side unused. So at some point, somebody had turned that ladder right side up so they could climb up on the ledge. Yeah. Anyways, moving right along. Some of this may be slightly confusing for some of you that aren't familiar with some of this terminology, but bear with me, stick it out through the end of the video, and you will arrive with me at the mega boom. This case is about connections. Who knows who, so on and so forth. You have to connect the dots as a proper investigator. So that's what I've done. Some of this stuff in this video I have chosen to redact. I have censored some full names. I do fear these people. I really do. And the origins of this family tree is personal and private, and it's not to be released. I'm just going to show you part of this tree, but I won't explain exactly how I got to the formulation of this tree. You'll just have to trust the process and witness this presentation.
You're going to have to trust us.
That was
on
Steve
at
G.
this point.
Check this out. Kaylee's father is named Steve, and Steve has a brother named Nathan. Nathan would be Kaylee's uncle. About a year ago, Nathan was sentenced to 20 years in the state penitentiary for passing away a man. Yeah, and the circumstances around his passing are very suspicious and are most likely drug-related, allegedly. Also, Steve's brother has a previous prison sentence for drugs. Yeah. So, about this passing away that Steve's brother's doing 20 years in the state penitentiary for, I found an article and it says, the one and only witness was uncooperative. I believe that uncooperative witness was the victim's son, because 2 days later, the victim's son called 911 with some additional information. And he had already known that his father was in the hospital regarding this event. It wasn't until his father passed that he decided to give some key information. That's a bit sus to us. And what is with these long delays calling 911? What's going on with these people? It seems to always be drug-related when there's a delay calling 911, understandably. You might be wondering what I'm getting at. What's this got to do with Brian Koberger and the Idaho 4? Bear with me. We're going to get there, I promise. It will be worth watching this video because I've uncovered some super important deets, allegedly. You got to remember, this is all someone else's fantasy. Not mine and not yours. We're just observers. Anyways, let's proceed. Steve's brother Nathan had no...
She's different from the others. She's a witch.
children according to his multiple divorce filings, as seen here. The man that Nathan is in prison for passing away, his name was Damon. So hypothetically, if Damon's family, or any memberships that he were a part of, wanted to seek revenge, they couldn't do it against Nathan's children because he had none. So his closest relative would have been Kaylee. Yeah, let me explain. This really isn't that uncommon for family members of victims to seek vigilante justice outside of the courtroom. I've seen it in many cases. Look at these various articles that I'm putting on the screen right here. This is on the news. This happens all the time. And look at the former UFC fighter Cain Velasquez. He did something very similar. He sought street vigilante justice outside of the courtroom for his victim family member. Yeah. Remember, I'm not just making this up. Kaylee got it the worst.
We have just confirmed. Kaylee Gonzalez's injuries were significantly more brutal than her best friend Maddie's injuries, which may end up being a very, very important piece of evidence when it comes to determining who the target was in this attack. A very, very important piece of evidence.
Her own father said so. That's why he's been the one that's been the most emotional regarding this whole thing. You don't see the other parents acting the way he's been acting. Plus, the police said it was targeted. And that's typically what they say for drug or cult hits.
What can you tell us about the targeted attack?
They have told us that it was targeted, but they told us they can't tell who.
I'll cut to the chase.
Yeah.
Their means of death don't match.
Maddie's
They don't.
and Kaylee's cause of death, it does not match based on the autopsy report.
They don't match.
Would indicate that one of them.
He doesn't have
may
to go
been
up the
target.
steps. Let's stop playing games, guys. I need somebody to step up and be an outfit. Be somebody to be a leader. Don't make me do it. I don't want to do it. He doesn't have to go up the steps. Their points of damage don't match. I'm just gonna say it. It wasn't leaked to me. I earned that. I paid for that funeral. I paid for that. It's my right. You ain't taking that from me.
Calm down.
If you don't want to say nothing, that's your bet. But don't say I'm leaking anything. I paid that bill. Sent my daughter to college to get an education. She came back in the box, and I can speak on that.
The police were very confident in the beginning that there was no danger to the rest of the public.
You're right.
They seemed to know exactly what was going on behind the scenes.
This was a targeted attack. That we believe it was a targeted attack. I mean, to be honest, you're going to have to trust us on that at this point because we're not going to release why we think that. You're going to have to trust us on that at this point.
Maybe there's even something really suspicious about the crime scene. Maybe there's a red F on one of the walls. We don't know because they won't exactly tell us much about anything. Plus, this was the one and only weekend that Kaylee had returned to that home and then she was leaving forever. How do you think she could afford that Range Rover anyways? We'd only be speculating because we really don't know. You can see the pain and frustration when Steve speaks.
Every day that goes by and you don't hear anything, what does that do?
Just tells me statistically I'm gonna have to do more work myself. I'm not going to sit here and just be a crybaby dad. I can't do it public if he's sitting there laughing and smirking and feeding off everybody's misery. If I can keep any part of this animal's fantasy from coming true, then I'm gonna do it.
Moscow PD has not been forthcoming or upfront or honest with him. He demands answers. In fact, he even wants cameras in the courtroom. Of course, he wants Brian Kohberger to be guilty, but in his gut, he allegedly may feel a different way because he knows about his brother. He knows about the lifestyle his brother was mixed up in. It's probably also why they won't release the 911 call and why it took so long for the 911 call to even be placed. There may be a serious drug/cult connection, and we're going to get to it. I did some digging, and then I did some more digging, and I formulated a family tree. I wanted to look into who the man was that Steve's brother Nathan passed away, and who his connections and family members were. I discovered that he has a son that is a manager at a marijuana grow operation near Portland. So I took a look. I looked into the son and who his connections were. I took a look at his Instagram page. I saw this picture. I saw that picture. I thought, okay, let me dive a little deeper. And then I found this guy. Somebody with the family name that has connections to Coeur d'Alene. And he's about the same exact age as the victim's son. So I'm assuming that he's the cousin. He's also connected to just north of Coeur d'Alene in a town called Alto. And when I do a Google search for Alto, Idaho, this is the first image I see. And I thought to myself, that's interesting. I think I've seen that place before somewhere. Was it in my dreams? No, it wasn't. Actually, I just saw that picture right here. Boom. The victim's son that Steve's brother passed away has a direct connection to Coeur d'Alene and Alto. That's the same place. If you don't think that's the same place, please let me know. But I think that's him in his little kayak floating around in that lake. And the trees look the same, the water looks the same, everything looks the same. But that's not all. We're gonna get to where I'm leading with all this. I know some of you out there are thinking, drip drop, get on with it. None of this means anything. Okie dokie, let's go. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the Delphi case from Indiana involving Richard Allen. He was arrested about 10 months ago. They say he committed the crime. The defense released paperwork recently that showed that the sheriff lied to get the arrest. I'm going to have to do a full-blown deep dive into that case very soon because Richard Allen is an innocent man. And he is allegedly being framed by the cult of Odin, who is actually allegedly responsible for the passing away of Abby and Libby, the two victims in Delphi, Indiana, RIP. And it's not just the Delphi defense lawyers coming up with weird, crazy conspiracy theories. Every single point that they came up with was based on the official police investigation that the top commanders refused to act on. The lower tier police officers and detectives were on the right trail. The higher up said, oh, no, do not investigate the cult of Odin. They've been cleared. That's right. In Delphi, the cult of Odin members were cleared within the first 2 weeks of the crime. Of course, the crime went unsolved for 6 years until they decided to arrest the wrong guy. My point is, they cleared all of the key members that were actually most likely probably guilty and responsible for the crime. Clear this. Boom! The cult of Odin are also known as Odinites, and they are very dangerous people, and some of them are some of the highest ranking officials in government. I'm actually in fear for my life just recording this video, but I think this information is important enough for me to risk everything. Now, getting back to the relative of the victim, that Kaylee's dad's brother passed away. Here he is. I know you're thinking, so what? Well, you might think that this is just a normal picture. There's nothing normal about this. Do you recognize that symbol on his right hand? If you don't, well, let me familiarize you with what that tattoo symbolizes. I recognized that symbol immediately because it was in the Delphi court documents. It's a Cult of Odin tattoo. Yeah. And you can verify this yourself with a simple Google search. Look at these images. This is undeniable. Let's look what he's got on his other hand. That right there is another Cult of Odin tattoo, as seen here. Yeah. This man is an Odinite. This man is part of the cult of Odin, allegedly. But that is what those tattoos actually factually are. Yeah. I'm not just making this up. This has been well researched. This is documented. This is an official, real cult. They have members all over the place. They really do scare me. And now taking a look at this other picture of him, it's pixelated, it's blurry, but I can see through the pixels. He's got an arrow tattooed on his forearm. That is also on the list of symbols of Odin. Yeah, so do you see where we're at in this investigation at this point? This is scary. Also, how about this shirt? As soon as I saw this shirt, I said to myself, drip drop, I think you've seen this shirt somewhere before. I saw something very similar in the Delphi court documents for the cult of Odin. It's some sort of manipulated American flag. And then they put their own little symbols on it. Now this one I may be stretching on. I don't know. But to me, it looks very similar, but an alteration of it. And there are alterations of these logos. The Odinites are in the cult of Odin, and they allegedly passed away the 2 girls in Delphi, Indiana. So really, it would be nothing for them to do a sacrifice/retaliation passing away. I mean, seriously, what are the odds that Kaylee's father's brother passes away a man and I find a direct connection from one of his relatives to the cult of Odin and to Coeur d'Alene? Yeah. Yeah. This type of stuff makes me nervous for myself and my family because I'm uncovering some really deep things here, ladies and gentlemen. This is someone else's fantasy, but it feels very real to me. But that's not all. This family member of the victim, his hometown is listed as just 2 hours away from Delphi, Indiana. And within the Delphi, Indiana court documents, Odinites are listed up to 2 hours away and more from the crime scene. An Odinite 2 hours away actually partially confessed to this crime. He confessed to his sisters. His sister took a lie detector test and she passed. He also made utterance to a police officer that he spit on one of the girls. Anyways, I know a lot about Delphi, Indiana, and I'm going to make a video on it. It's seriously super important because an innocent man is rotting away and being tortured in jail, and he's on the verge of facing the rest of his life in a cage for a crime he did not commit, allegedly. Also of interest, let's talk about dates and numbers. The Moscow quad passing away happened only 2 weeks after Richard Allen was arrested for the Delphi passing aways of Abby and Libby. That crime in Delphi happened February 13th at approximately 3 p.m. As you know, Moscow was allegedly November 13th at 3 a.m. I'm seeing 13s and 3s. Both crimes happened on the 13th, both at 3 o'clock. People in cults really like their symbolism, numerology, and these weird things. I'm not just making up these weird connections. If you think they're coincidences, there certainly are a lot of coincidences here. I know that there's only about 3 or 4 good, honest, truthful YouTube channels out there that you can count on. Most of them will just give you clickbait, false information. The 4 of us, we don't believe in coincidences. We can see the truth, we follow the clues, and we connect the dots. But I know some of you out there might think this one's so far-fetched that I'm on my own on this one. Maybe, maybe not, but I'm just a truth seeker, looking for justice for the victims. There is so much more information to cover regarding this cult and the drug connections. Xana's own mother was arrested on some serious drug charges only 1 week after this crime happened. And there is a lot of other alleged connections, but I can't possibly cover it all in this one episode. And this cult stuff is scary business because I know they're probably watching me right now. So, now that my life's at high risk, if anything happens to me, if I disappear, you probably know which organization to look into. They'll probably get away with it because they don't seem to leave any DNA at any of these crime scenes. They seem to be really good at what they do because they've got the right people in the right positions of power. I really hope the cult of Odin doesn't come for me. Please pray for me. And good must defeat evil. The victims deserve it. The victims need it. We, as a civilized human species, need it. We don't need these evil demonic creatures among us always trying to hurt us and frame people and put innocent people in prison and pass people away. It's not right. I think I'm really starting to understand the answer when I ask, what do they have to hide? Yeah. If any of these weirdos try to frame me or set me up for anything, just know I didn't do it. So I just wanted all of you to know that because the things I'm seeing happen to Richard Allen and Brian Koberger, that's scary. I think they're actually doing shock therapy on Richard Allen. Look at the deterioration of this man. He is a shell of what he once was. He was a CVS pharmacist. He's not a cold-blooded KILLER. This is a man that they have stolen his soul. They have broken him. He's in danger, and they will most likely pass him away before the trial happens because now that they're aware that the defense attorneys know, they're not going to want this exposed in the courtroom. And Richard Allen actually wants cameras in the courtroom because he wants the world to see what's been happening. He wants the world to know that he's being framed. But anyways, this episode's about Brian Koberger, but I do believe there is a link with the two cases because of the cults involved. Cults are real, and cults are real dangerous. Thank you so much for watching this presentation. I really will do my best to protect Baby Drip, and I just want to let everyone know watching this, we are not a danger to ourselves, and we would never do anything to pass ourselves away. Never, ever. A reminder, we are seeking truth and justice. Please consider supporting me on Patreon. I'm going to put all of my links down below. Make sure you sign up to my second YouTube channel. Thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate you. And until next time, remember to stay safe out there because you know it's a dangerous world.
No, they don't look like cops, Data. Well, I'm going to get off here. You guys have a good night. And I'm going to probably post some more videos sometime tomorrow. And I'm going to go to live again tomorrow night around the same time I did tonight. Y'all have a good night and peace.
Thank you for tuning in to the True Crime Cult. Smash that like button on your way out.